But we started off talking about Brother Kane. You've got some dates coming up in Texas. By the time this episode comes out, those dates will be the same week. So you've got a couple dates coming up in Texas in May with Brother Kane. So talk to me about those shows. Is there anything beyond that? And I also wanted to know if your debut album that you repressed on vinyl is still available.
Yeah, man. Thank you very much, Dave. We are for sure going to be doing some other shows. You know, my new day job is playing guitar in Lynyrd Skynyrd, which I'm so grateful for. It's an honor that I could have never seen coming. So that's sort of the mothership of the calendar.
Gotcha.
And but the cool thing about that is Skynyrd is such a big operation that I kind of know in advance, you know, what certainly the next 6 months are going to look like. So then we can take that and find some places to try to book some more Brother Kane stuff. Very short version of this, Dave. I had no interest. Brother Kane was not on my radar in any way other than being proud of those songs, you know, loving the guys that I made that music with and toured with. And I would always play some of those songs when I would do solo gigs.
Right.
No concept about putting it back together. I was like, man, no way the original band get together. Everybody spread out, whatever. So it wasn't until after I started playing with Skynyrd that it was my manager, Kevin. He's like, man, this Skynyrd thing is set up so great. They're only doing 40, maybe 50 shows a year. It's mostly weekends. What about Brother Kane? Because that's what everybody started asking me about.
Yeah.
The guys in Skynyrd, you know, the fans I would encounter at the venue or at the hotel. Man, I saw Brother Kane open for Van Halen in Austin in 1995, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I give Kevin credit for kind of helping push it forward. And yes, reissuing that vinyl record, which you can still get. Just go to our website, brotherkane.com.
Right.
You can get it's the first ever pressing on vinyl of that debut record. We're trying to move forward with doing the same thing with our second album, Seeds, and then ultimately the third album, Wishpool, as well.
Yeah. I just wanted to say this also on the subject of Brother Kane. I remember when Got No Shame came out, and I remember hearing that song, and it sounded to me, it was one of those moments where you hear a band introduces themselves by way of a kick-ass song, and you're like, it kind of reminded me of when I first heard Guns N' Roses or the Black Crowes. It's like, whoa, this is the start of something that's going to last forever. This is so good. There's got to be so much more from this well to pull from, because this is a kick-ass rock song.
Wow.
And you guys made some waves and did your thing, but after 3 albums, as you said, it kind of fizzled out or whatever. But I think a lot of people remember that song fondly because it was such an ass kicker when it came out.
Wow, Dave. Thank you, man. Yeah. And if you would have told me that that was ultimately going to be a portion of music fans' impression of what we were doing, that would have been the ultimate goal that I would have wanted to accomplish. Because specifically, the 2 bands that you just said, Guns N' Roses and the Black Crowes, they informed my kind of punkish belief that, oh, if those guys can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
Because they weren't necessarily playing the game of, well, we need to wear this or we need to sound like that.
Right.
There was a very bold commitment to their influences, and hey, we're gonna celebrate the music that we dig. We're not gonna conform in any way just to appease a record company or a promotion or a radio station or whatever. Man,
yeah,
you know, I'm sure it was the same maybe for you guys too at that time. It's like, look, I don't take anything away from, you know, MTV and the bands of that era that were making some noise. I was just, you know, coming from the South and growing up so deeply steeped in Southern rock music, gospel music, R&B. There was just nothing out at that time that had also those influences as well as just pop music, hard rock, straight ahead, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So especially the fucking Black Crowes, man. Those first two records just were rocket fuel, for my brain.
I think that's what resonates with people when you mention Brother Kane is all those things you just said. People were listening and they heard something that sounded fresh. They heard something that harkened back to their influences. It's like, whoa, a band that was raised on Skynyrd and the early Aerosmith and Nazareth and, all this really kick-ass rock and roll stuff. And at that time, something like that, even though the influences were well established at the time, that was a fresh sound again. And you guys sort of embodied all that. And again, and like you said, it wasn't about the image. You guys were on MTV in your denim jackets and scruffy looking and all that stuff. There was a cowbell in the song. I mean, it was badass, dude.
That cowbell, man. I love that. I love that cowbell to this day. It's fun. It's funny, man. Whenever I do a gig, like somebody will be like, "Hey, man, we want to fly you in and have you play this thing, and we got a band. We've put a rhythm section together. They'll learn whatever you want to learn." I always travel with a cowbell. It's like, dude, if we're playing Got No Shame, the fucking cowbell has to be in it, man.
That's right, man.
It's just not the same without it.
Right.
So yeah.
That's right.
I appreciate that, Dave. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad that the album is available on vinyl. People can look for it, brotherkane.com. And now moving on quickly to Skynyrd, you, like all of us in this room, grew up on the, Leonard Skinner. It's got to be a huge honor for you to play those songs every night. When you stepped in for Gary Rossington, did you learn anything about his playing style that you weren't aware of until you had to sort of replicate it?
Good question.
Great question. The answer is a resounding yes, absolutely. I was so fortunate that I spoke to Ricky Medlock and Johnny Van Zant, who I knew both of them. I'd been really close to Ricky. We'd been almost like family, man, for 30 years, even before he started playing guitar in Skynyrd. So their producer, Ben Fowler, Ben has really worked on most all of the Skynyrd studio and live albums from maybe even the late 90s. He's been a part of their thing for a long time. The second day, Ben sent me an email with a Dropbox folder with a bunch of live, board recordings, and it had Gary's guitar isolated to one side. So I had the band on the left and just Gary on the right. And guys, it was so beautiful to just kind of get inside of that. And the first thing I was almost shocked at, because I'm a lifelong Skynyrd fan. I've been a fan since I was 12 years old. Yes. Like before the plane crash, I was a fan.
Absolutely.
I still didn't understand that Gary played so many of those iconic guitar solos.
Yep.
I mean, you could always tell Ed King or Steve Gaze because they were on the Strat or the Telecaster. But there were solos that I thought were Alan Collins that were actually Gary.
Wow.
So very quickly, when I told the guys, "Hey man, I'd be happy to help out," because they had dates booked. Gary had given them the blessing to go find somebody. They called Gary and said, "Hey, what about Damon Johnson from Brother Kane?" And Gary totally remembered us, remembered me, and all that was great. But we didn't have time to get all warm and fuzzy. It's like, shit, I got in this room right here that I'm talking to you guys in, got under the headphones, and I had about 3 days to get 16 songs down with the instructions of, man, learn Gary's parts as note for note as possible.
Wow.
So that's a long answer to your question. And the last thing I'll add is that Gary has a much lighter right hand. That is the secret, man, of that soulful backbeat. Gary played almost like Aretha Franklin sang. He was always on the back side of the beat. So I've always been a little more on top of it. And then you add my excitement, anxiety, fear, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, I had to like remind myself, hey man, take a deep breath and get inside that rhythm section and lay that back. And it helped me so much, guys, especially with the iconic ballads like Tuesday's Gone, Simple Man, and that beautiful slide guitar on Freebird.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, my knees were shaking, man. Those first few shows, I was scared to death.
True.
Not because I had not been on the big stage before. It wasn't about that at all.
No.
It was just understanding the magnitude that for 50 solid years, there had been one person standing on stage left in Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Yeah.
And now that guy's not there anymore, and I'm standing there. That was fucking heavy for me, man.
Yeah, dude.
That's heavy for anybody.
I was going to say I can imagine, but I can't imagine. That's a
Yeah,
lot. That's a lot of weight.
It's kind of like it's a once in a lifetime, not of this world, unexpected. It's like unexpected. Like I almost said, like there's absolute zero feeling of how to go about that other than tighten the straps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trust your instinct.
Put on your big boy jeans and let's go.
Yeah.
Jason, I've said this. I've said this a couple times in recent conversations, but I think in a way I felt like I had already been so fortunate and kind of used up my get to play with iconic artists, fairy dust. Wow, what was that? That just
I don't know.
on my screen.
That
was awesome. Who did that?
That was you.
Great.
That was
That's
you.
on your end. That's not us.
I'm telling y'all, man, this newest iPhone update, something is up. I'm not thrilled about it. It's doing weird stuff.
You said a magic word, and the
All this
iPhone fairies came in and flew over your head and
Started
dropped some
flying
confetti.
confetti around. Yeah.
That's crazy.